Let me tell you how I went from being a loyal employee to becoming the owner of the company that tried to erase me. This is the story of betrayal, silence, and brutal, calculated revenge. I was a senior systems analyst at a mid-sized software firm, 6 years in 3 promotions, and the architect of our most successful product rollout to date. Enter Samantha, the newly hired COO. Stylish, sharp-tongued, and strategic in all the wrong ways. She didn't build anything. She just took credit for things that worked. At first, I thought it was politics. Then she started presenting my reports with her name on them, my workflow diagrams, my code comments, my architecture. And then she fired me. No warning, no explanation. Just, we're restructuring. Thank you for your service. And just like that, I was locked out of my system, my files, my team. But what Samantha didn't know was that I had already built my backdoor. I never trusted the executive team. So from day one, I created a sandbox version of the platform, stored on a separate virtual cloud drive, with full version history and timestamps under my personal IP. Why? Because when you're the one building the entire infrastructure, you understand that ownership isn't about titles. It's about leverage. While they were celebrating quarterly earnings from my work, I was consulting with a lawyer. I showed him the build logs, my GitHub timestamps, my technical roadmap, my Slack threads. The evidence was bulletproof. Turns out, because of a loophole in my contract, I retained partial licensing rights. They had never formally transferred intellectual property before launch, which meant they were using my system illegally. I didn't sue them. That would have been too easy. 6 years. That's how long I worked at Betrayal Software, a mid-sized tech company nestled in the middle of Silicon Valley's aggressive, but not yet famous scene. I joined straight out of grad school as a junior systems architect and worked my way up through late nights, missed holidays, and personal sacrifices that turned into product launches, client wins, and glowing reviews. And I didn't mind. I loved the work. I was never the loudest in the room, never the face of the pitch deck. But behind every successful product was my architecture, my code, my fail-safes. Until Samantha came in. The new COO, Samantha Reynolds, was everything I wasn't. Flashy, well-dressed, loud. Her LinkedIn read like it had been written by a PR firm. Words like visionary and scalability guru littered every headline. She joined with energy and a not-so-subtle promise to clean house. At first, I stayed out of her way. I wasn't a threat. I wasn't interested in office politics or glory. I just wanted to keep building. But 2 weeks in, I noticed something strange. A presentation Samantha gave to the board had my exact diagrams. My system notes, down to the error margins, were on a slide with her name stamped on the corner. No mention of my team. No mention of me. I brought it up with my manager. He told me to let it go. She's the new COO. Pick your battles. So I did. I let it go again when she gave interviews to tech blogs referencing her vision for the product roadmap, the one I had written in a 3-day, no-sleep marathon a month earlier. I even let it go when she invited our dev lead to her office to tighten up the product build, using code I wrote and taking all the credit. But then came the Friday morning meeting. I showed up to our weekly team huddle with a cup of coffee and a fresh debug report. The whole crew was there, 10 of us spread out across a whiteboard-stained conference room with laptops open and half-written code on our minds. Samantha walked in with HR. We're restructuring, she said, effective immediately. Lila's position has been made redundant. This is a strategic decision. Redundant. I wasn't even allowed to speak. My access was revoked by the time I got back to my desk. They walked me out like a criminal. No goodbyes. No dignity. No last look at the thing I had helped build from the ground up. I didn't even cry, because while she thought she was erasing me, she didn't know what I had kept. See, when you're the person writing the code, the real backbone code, the stuff that lives on the company's private servers and makes the whole thing run, you learn to leave yourself a backdoor. Nothing malicious, nothing destructive, just a sandbox copy. A virtual clone I used to experiment with improvements after hours, hosted on a private dev server registered under my own domain, built with my own credentials, stored in a secure GitHub repo under an alias only I knew. I had it all, not just the product, the infrastructure, the core logic, the integration maps. The soul of Viralix's flagship system lived in my laptop bag. I went home, slept for 14 hours, then called a lawyer, a very expensive, very aggressive IP attorney named Clara Ewan, who had no patience for nonsense and a perfect win record. I showed her the repo, the timestamps, the emails, the Slack threads, the roadmap I wrote 6 weeks before Samantha ever touched a keyboard. She leaned back, crossed her arms, and said, "You don't need revenge. You need leverage." And just like that, the plan began. Clara Ewan didn't waste time. Within 24 hours of seeing my sandbox repo and the internal documentation trail, she had scheduled 2 meetings, one with a digital forensics firm and another with a strategic venture consultant. She called me the morning after our first meeting, her voice crisp as black coffee. "We're not suing them yet," she said. "We're going to box them in, make the value of their company bleed from the inside." I didn't understand at first. "You have the original system in its entirety," she continued, "and the company is operating without a formal IP transfer agreement. That's their Achilles heel." Turns out, Viralix had overlooked something critical: ownership of the codebase. My employment contract gave them usage rights for what I built, but nowhere had they secured a transfer of intellectual property for the system as a whole. This is common in startups. Fast growth, sloppy paperwork. They assume if you built it under their roof, it belongs to them. But in the absence of a signed transfer, that assumption is just that, an assumption. Legally, they were sitting on my software, building the strategy. Clara's strategy was ruthless and elegant. Step 1, establish uncontested proof of ownership. We had GitHub timestamps, commits made under my verified account, Slack messages where Samantha acknowledged your system logic, meeting recordings of me presenting the architecture to execs. Step 2, file a copyright registration for the full original system, under my name, not Viralix's. It passed because I had the digital fingerprints, the logs, and the version history to prove the build was mine. Step 3, register a licensing entity, a brand new LLC we called Red Stack Licensing Company. All ownership of the copyrighted software was transferred to Red Stack, which I now owned entirely. Clara smiled when the paperwork came through. "Congratulations," she said. "You now legally own the backbone of a multimillion-dollar company." The next step was quiet, but brutal. Clara sent a cease and desist letter to Viralix's legal team. It included the copyright registration, proof of infringement, and a formal demand to either license the system from Red Stack Licensing Company, cease all use, and destroy the current codebase. The deadline? 10 business days. I wasn't in the room when they opened that letter, but I wish I had been. 3 days later, I got a message on LinkedIn from Samantha. "Samantha R. Can we talk? I think there's been a misunderstanding." No apology, no ownership, just panic disguised as diplomacy. I didn't respond. Clara did, with an email to Viralix's full executive board. Repeat button, internal collapse. The company's CTO resigned within a week. Turns out, he'd raised concerns about the missing IP documents months ago and had been ignored. The board opened an internal audit. Investors caught wind. A scheduled Series C funding round was put on hold. Samantha? She was pulled into a crisis PR meeting after screenshots of her plagiarizing my reports circulated online. I didn't leak them, but let's just say the truth has a way of slipping out. The best part? Clara arranged a licensing meeting with Viralix's interim CEO. I wore a navy blazer, sat across the table from two execs and a very quiet Samantha. They offered me a licensing fee, modest, almost insulting. Clara slid a counterproposal across the table. Full licensing rights, a non-disclosure agreement for past damages, a controlling share offer, or we walk. They blinked. You want to own part of the company? The CEO asked, stunned. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Not part of it, I said, just the part that makes it run. They agreed, because they had no choice. They could either pay millions in damages, rebuild their system from scratch, and risk total collapse, or give me exactly what I deserved. I walked out with a 40% controlling stake in Viralix, a licensing contract worth 7 figures, a clause ensuring Samantha's exit within 30 days, her final email to the team, cold, corporate, no mention of why she was leaving. But I knew, and so did everyone else. I wasn't loud. I wasn't dramatic. I just knew the one thing they didn't. The people who build quietly are often the ones holding all the keys. The day I walked back into Viralix as a majority stakeholder, not a single person asked me where I had been. They already knew. Whispers had already filled the building, the quiet engineer, who was fired by the new COO, only to return weeks later with the legal and financial weight to bring the company to its knees. I didn't storm in. I didn't demand an apology. I walked in with the same calm confidence that had built their most valuable product from the ground up. But this time, I wasn't there to serve. I was there to lead. The first executive meeting after my acquisition was held in the same conference room where I used to sit silently at the far end of the table, notebook in hand, waiting to be acknowledged. Now, I sat at the head. Some execs were visibly nervous. Others tried to play it cool, but everyone understood something had fundamentally shifted. The CEO, Richard, tried to open the meeting with pleasantries. I didn't let him finish. Let's be clear, I said, we're not here to move on. We're here to move forward differently. Samantha's name wasn't mentioned. She'd already resigned, effective immediately. And if she thought she'd land at another tech company with a neat NDA, she was wrong. My legal team ensured that her exit was accompanied by a very public press release outlining the truth, misattribution of intellectual property, and leadership failure. She became a case study, not an executive. Laptop computer, reshaping the culture. The first thing I did was audit the team structure. I met one-on-one with every developer, designer, and systems engineer, especially the junior ones. I wanted to know how the culture had been allowed to fester into what it became. Over and over, I heard the same thing. We didn't feel seen. Our work kept getting filtered upward and claimed. It was exhausting just trying to be heard. So I did what nobody had done in years. I rewrote the feedback and promotion framework from scratch. Anonymous peer reviews became part of the quarterly review process. Product credit was publicly displayed in internal releases. And most importantly, every piece of code, design, and idea was traced, logged, and attributed. Recognition wasn't just symbolic. It was structural. Remember, the lead dev, Samantha, tried to poach from my team? The one she used to manipulate the system after I left? I rehired him. We had coffee the week after my return. I asked him how he felt about coming back. He hesitated. It's hard to trust leadership now, he said. I nodded. I understood that better than anyone, then helped me rebuild it. I replied, from the inside, your rules, real input. He said yes the next day. Within 2 months, our retention numbers rose by 30%. Applications doubled. Industry blogs started whispering about the new Viralix. I didn't care about the headlines. I cared that our dev chat rooms were laughing again, that ideas were flowing without fear, that engineers were no longer afraid to attach their names to their work. People assume revenge has to be loud, lawsuits, shouting, exposed emails. But my revenge was simple. I outlasted her. I outmaneuvered her. And then I made sure no one like her would ever hold power here again. I replaced the exec coaching budget with a leadership mentorship program, pairing experienced architects with junior hires. I brought in female engineers from underrepresented groups. I rebuilt HR from the ground up with trauma-informed policies. And I renamed the system. It used to be called SamCore, a name Samantha had branded during her brief tenure. I changed it to Ember, a quiet nod to the fire that nearly consumed the company, and the steady flame that kept it alive from the start. Me. 3 months later, I got a letter, not from Samantha, from her lawyer, a request to meet. She wanted to apologize, to explain herself, off the record. I declined. Some stories don't need sequels. Some endings are best left quiet. When I think back to the day I was fired, I don't feel anger anymore. I feel clarity, because when you spend your life in the background, it's easy to forget your own worth. Easy to let louder people take credit, take space, take over. But silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes silence is strategy. And sometimes the person they tried to bury is the one who already knew how to grow underground. But rebuilding something from the ashes and watching it flourish on your terms is transcendent. After taking control of Viralix and restructuring the internal culture, I could have stopped. I had everything I needed: ownership, financial security, and a company that finally respected its creators. But I wasn't finished, because while Viralix was the battlefield, Red Stack Licensing Company was the future. Red Stack had started as a legal structure, a shell company formed by my attorney, Clara Ewan, to secure my ownership of the original software system I built. But after the dust settled at Viralix, I looked at that name, sitting quietly in my portfolio, and thought, what if I turned this into something real? Something that gave developers and creators like me a chance to protect their ideas before someone tried to take them. I reached out to Clara again. What if Red Stack wasn't just a licensing firm? I asked, what if it was a platform for creators, especially women in tech, to license, protect, and scale what they build? She didn't hesitate. Then let's build it. Within a month, we had registered Red Stack as a full legal tech consultancy. I invested part of my licensing income from Viralix into a modest office space, a clean, minimalist floor in a co-working building downtown. We hired 2 engineers, a legal consultant, and a startup operations lead. That was it. We didn't need flash. We had purpose. Red Stack would offer 3 core services: licensing defense for creators to protect their intellectual property from corporate misuse, scalable architecture advising so developers could retain ownership while building for clients, equity coaching to help young tech professionals negotiate fair compensation and build leverage from the start. Our tagline: you built it, you keep it. I thought it would take months to get our first client. It took 6 days. An indie app developer named Tessa emailed us through a referral from Clara. She had built a machine learning tool used in a health tech pilot, only to watch the project get absorbed into a VC-funded company without her permission. Sound familiar? I walked her through the process personally. We reconstructed her logs, filed her copyright, proved her code's lineage, and within 30 days, the company that tried to ghost her was offering a six-figure licensing agreement and retroactive royalties. Tessa cried on the Zoom call. "I thought I had no power," she said. She was wrong. She just didn't know where to point it. Within 3 months, we had 12 active clients. At 6 months, 45. Red Stack became a whisper on dev forums, in private Slack communities, on LinkedIn among women in tech who had their work rewritten, overwritten, or erased. And every single one of them had the same story in different fonts. They took credit. They used my work without permission. I didn't know I had options. Now, they did. And we gave them more than legal protection. We gave them a strategy, a structure, a map to reclaim power. Meanwhile, at Viralix, the changes I made started inspiring more than just press. Other companies took notice. I was invited to speak at 2 tech summits, not as a survivor of a toxic workplace, but as a builder, a strategist, a systems thinker who not only reclaimed ownership, but turned the playbook inside out. At one summit, during a panel on tech equity, a venture capitalist asked me, "If you could say one thing to someone who's being overlooked in their own company, what would it be?" I paused, then answered, "Never forget that silence can be a strategy, but only if it ends in action. Take notes, take screenshots, take your time, then take what's yours." The audience went silent for a beat, then erupted. I didn't smile out of pride. I smiled out of recognition because I saw women nodding. I saw men thinking twice. I saw founders taking notes. And I knew that this wasn't just about my story anymore. It was about what came next. By year 1, Red Stack had secured licensing or royalty deals worth over $6.2 million for creators across 5 countries. Most of them had never even known their work was protected. We helped a UI designer win royalties from a luxury automotive app. We stopped a startup from selling off a founder's back-end logic as company-owned. We negotiated a contract where a junior coder now receives equity from a feature they built solo during beta. None of them had lawyers before us. Now, they had structure, language, leverage. I hired more women, more people who had been in my shoes. And I built a culture where no one's name got buried under someone else's title. 16 months after Red Stack launched, I found myself cleaning out my personal archives. My old laptop, stacks of notebooks, handwritten workflow ideas from my early Viralix days. At the very bottom of the box was a sticky note, torn and faint. It read, "Don't forget to back it up. Never know when they'll take credit." I had written that the night I created my first local backup of the SAM system, long before I knew I'd need it. Back then, it was instinct. Now it was legacy. I framed that note. It hangs in the Red Stack conference room, right above our motto. You built it. You keep it. Success has a scent. And when you start to win, not quietly, but noticeably, the people who once ignored you begin to pay attention. Some watch in admiration. Others, they scheme. 3 weeks after Red Stack crossed its 1-year anniversary, I got a call from Clara. Her voice was steady, but serious. "You're being targeted." I leaned back in my chair. By who? A coalition of investors, mostly small to mid-cap VCs. Some of them are connected to companies we've gone up against. They're lobbying to introduce new clauses into early-stage term sheets, ones that strip creators of licensing rights before they even sign. It wasn't surprising. We were winning, and those wins were costing them money. But this was a strategic counterattack. They weren't just fighting Red Stack. They were trying to legislate us into silence. A few weeks later, a tech blog ran an article titled, "Licensing Firms Are Stifling Innovation. Are They the New Patent Trolls?" The piece was clearly planted quotes from anonymous VCs, warnings about licensing leverage being used as a bludgeon, and indirect references to Red Stack. It painted us as opportunists. It said we were slowing down growth. It said we were exploiting gray areas in contracts, the same ones they exploited for decades. It even referenced me, not by name, but as a former employee who sued her way into ownership. That was the moment I realized they weren't trying to win legally. They were trying to shift the narrative. I didn't go to war. I went to speak. At the Women in Tech Equity Summit, I opened with this. You can call me a disruptor. You can call me difficult. You can even call me a troll if that helps you sleep. But understand this. Every system we've built, we've had to fight for. You only call it aggressive when we win. It went viral, not because it was angry, but because it was true. The media started asking real questions. Founders began digging through their old contracts. Coders started consulting lawyers before signing NDAs. Red Stack's site traffic tripled in a week. And the article that called us trolls, it quietly vanished from the blog's homepage. One day, I received a hand-delivered envelope to Red Stack's office. No return address. Inside was a typed letter. You've made your point, but you've also made enemies. You should know when to stop. No name, no signature, just a message. Power doesn't like to be challenged. I looked at it for a long time. Then I fed it through the shredder. We didn't back down. We pivoted. Clara helped us draft a new product, a founder's licensing kit, a free template library with IP assignment clauses, early equity negotiation tools, sample contracts with creator-friendly terms. We distributed it through private Slack groups and forums. No fees, no fine print, no catch, just power given freely. And suddenly, we weren't just defending creators. We were educating them. By the end of that quarter, Red Stack had signed 30-plus new clients, blocked 3 investor-backed IP takeovers, and partnered with 2 law schools to train students in creative rights litigation. The reckoning didn't crush us. It clarified our mission. They wanted me quiet, controlled, humbled. Instead, I turned their threats into momentum. A year and a half after I was fired from Viralix, I found myself back in the exact same cafe where Samantha first introduced herself to our team. Funny, isn't it? The place looked the same. Industrial lighting, overpriced lattes, polished concrete floors. But I was different now. Stronger, sharper. No longer someone who made herself smaller in the presence of loud people. I wasn't there by accident. I was there to meet someone. A week earlier, I received an email. Subject, professional closure. From Samantha Reynolds. Lila, I know I have no right to ask for your time, but I'm asking anyway. I don't want to rehash the past. I'm not looking for sympathy. I just want to explain something. To you, not to the press, not to investors. If you're willing, I'll be at the Crooked Bean Cafe on Tuesday at noon. No pressure, no cameras, just truth. I read it twice. Then again, closure? From the woman who tried to erase me? I wasn't sure what I wanted out of the meeting. Maybe just the satisfaction of her seeing what I'd become. Or maybe, if I'm honest, a chance to see if she'd finally admit what she did. She was already seated when I arrived. Dressed down. No blazer. No red lipstick. Just a cardigan and quiet eyes that looked like they hadn't slept well in weeks. She stood up as I approached. I didn't hug her. Thanks for coming, she said. I nodded. Saturday. Waited. She stirred her coffee once, twice, then took a breath. I messed up, she said. Not just with you, with the whole culture. I thought if I could show results fast, I'd finally be taken seriously. So I cut corners, took credit, fired you because I saw you as a threat. there it was. No excuses. No spin. Just the truth. I stayed silent for a moment, watching her. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, just dimmed. You could have said this a year ago, I replied. She nodded. I know, but back then, I didn't care. I thought I won. There was again, honesty, and it left me feeling unsteady, not angry, not vindicated, just aware of how much had changed. Why now? I asked. Because I'm trying to start something new, she said. And every time I sit in a room with potential partners, I wonder if they've read the headlines. If they know what I did to you. She paused. I'm not asking for a reference or forgiveness. I just needed to tell you, face to face, that I was wrong. I looked down at my coffee. It had gone cold. You weren't wrong just because you got caught. I said quietly. You were wrong because you built your success on someone else's back and thought no one would notice. She nodded again. No tears, just stillness. I see that now, she whispered. There was a long silence between us. Not hostile, just full. I'm not here to ruin you, I added, but I'm not going to vouch for you, either. Fair. She slid a folded piece of paper across the table. This is a full written admission. You don't have to use it, but if it ever helps another woman avoid what I did, then maybe I can start making it right. I took it. We stood. Good luck, Samantha, I said. You too, Lila. And that was it. No dramatic ending. No handshake. No redemption arc. Just the closing of a door, softly. I never used the letter. I didn't need to. But I kept it in a locked drawer at Red Stack. Not as a weapon, as a reminder that people do change, but only after they're held accountable. Back at the office, I found a message waiting for me. A developer from Argentina, 20 years old, had filed her first licensing request using our founder's kit. She'd been working on a digital education platform and received an offer from a venture firm that tried to force her into signing over full IP. She refused. She quoted Red Stack's policy guide. She held the line. They revised the terms. She now owns 70% of her code base and earns royalties on every implementation. I stared at her email and smiled. This is what it's all for. The strange thing about building something that lasts is realizing you may not be around to see how far it goes. Red Stack was never meant to be a dynasty. It was meant to be a defense, a shield against the kind of betrayal I lived through. But somehow, it had become more than that. It had become a movement. By year 2, Red Stack had helped over 400 creators reclaim or protect their work. Some launched their own ventures. Some earned their first equity. Some, like that young developer in Argentina, refused to be bullied into silence. Our licensing kits had been translated into 5 languages. Our client Slack was more active than some seed stage incubators. And for every win we celebrated, there was someone else learning. I built this. I have value. I don't have to give it away. The tech world began to notice, not just the noise, the structure. That's when I realized I didn't need to be at the center anymore. I started stepping back. Slowly, I promoted 2 of my earliest team members, the same ones who joined me when we were still working out of that borrowed co-working space. I gave them keys to everything: trust, responsibility, legacy. Don't protect this because it's mine. I told them, protect it because it's ours now. It belongs to everyone who was told they weren't enough. They understood, better than I ever hoped they would. I don't visit Viralix much anymore. It's stable now, productive. The culture lives on. The systems work. But I keep one thing framed in my office. A sticky note. Torn. Old. Almost faded. Don't forget to back it up. It was the first thing I ever wrote in my personal dev notes. Before the firing, before the lawsuits, before Red Stack. Back then, it was a reminder about code. Now it's something else, a reminder to protect what matters before the world tries to take it. They say revenge is sweet, but honestly, justice is sweeter, especially when it doesn't end with someone falling, but with someone else rising.